At night, from across the Huangpu River, you can read a building's financial statements with your own eyes. Shanghai Tower is 632 meters tall, 128 floors, the second tallest building on Earth. And for years after it opened, when the sun went down, entire bands of that tower simply went dark. Floor after floor after floor. No lights, no tenants, no revenue. This is a building that cost $2.4 billion to construct. A building backed by the government of one of the wealthiest cities in the world. A building that won nearly every engineering award that exists. And it could not do the one thing every commercial building is built to do: fill itself with paying tenants. To understand how this tower failed, you have to understand what it was supposed to prove. Go back to the early 1990s. Shanghai's Pudong district, the land east of the river, was largely farmland and warehouses. Then came the economic reforms, and with them, a master plan. Lu Jiazui would become China's answer to Wall Street. And at the center of that plan sat 3 reserved plots of land, set aside for 3 super tall towers that would announce China's financial arrival to the world. The first was the Jinmao Tower, finished in 1999. The second was the Shanghai World Financial Center, completed in 2008. The third plot, the most important plot, was reserved for the tallest of them all. That plot waited 15 years. And here's the first entry in our file, because it matters who builds a project like this. Shanghai Tower was not built by a private developer betting its own money. It was developed by a consortium of state-owned enterprises, with funding flowing primarily from Shanghai's municipal government. Construction started in 2008. The structure topped out in 2015 and opened to the public in 2016. Remember that funding structure. Because when we get to the losses, you're going to want to know whose money actually evaporated. And the answer, ultimately, is the public's. Let me be clear about something up front, because this channel deals in verified facts, not cheap shots. As a piece of engineering, Shanghai Tower is genuinely remarkable. The design, led by the architecture firm Gensler with Shanghai-born architect Jun Xia heading the team, twists the building roughly 120 degrees from base to crown. That twist isn't decoration. Shanghai sits in typhoon territory, and the rotated form sheds wind loads, cutting the structural steel the project needed and saving a reported tens of millions of dollars in materials. The building wears 2 layers of glass, an outer skin wrapped around an inner one, creating atrium buffer zones that insulate the tower like a thermos. Wind turbines near the crown generate supplemental power. Rainwater gets captured and recycled. The elevators were, at opening, the fastest on the planet. The observation deck, at 562 meters, set a world record. The building earned LEED Platinum certification, the kind of green credential that, in theory, lets a landlord charge premium rents. On paper, every box was checked. Tallest in China, greenest in its class, records up and down the spec sheet. So, here's the question this file actually has to answer. If the engineering was world-class, how did the business fail this badly? Drop your theory in the comments right now before we get into the numbers, because I want to know how many of you see the answer coming. It's not the one most people guess. The building opened in 2016. Now let's look at what the record shows happened next. By mid-2017, a full year after opening, reporting indicated that only around 60% of the office space had even been leased. And of those tenants who had signed, only about a third had actually moved in. Read that again. A year into operation, the second tallest building on Earth had entire floors sitting empty, leased on paper, vacant in reality. The international corporations the tower was designed to attract, the multinational banks and global firms that fill skyscrapers in London and New York, largely stayed away. The tenants who did sign were predominantly domestic Chinese companies, and the financial consequences were brutal. With revenue trickling in and operating costs running at full scale because you cannot heat, cool, secure, and maintain half of a 600-meter tower, reported losses pushed the project more than $1.5 billion into debt. On top of the $2.4 billion it cost to build, what kept the tenants out? The file shows 3 distinct failures, and each one has a paper trail. The first failure is bureaucratic, and it's the one glossy architecture magazines almost never mention. For years after opening, Shanghai Tower struggled to obtain its complete fire safety certifications from local authorities. Officials raised concerns tied to the building's extreme height, because evacuating a 128-story tower is a genuinely hard problem, and the approval process dragged on and on. Now think about what that means if you're a multinational corporation's real estate director. Your legal department asks one question: does the building have full fire certification? And for years, the honest answer was not yet. No Fortune 500 general counsel on Earth signs a lease under those conditions. Here's what makes this entry in the file so damning. The developer and the fire authorities ultimately answer to overlapping arms of the same government. The city that funded the tower and the city that wouldn't fully certify the tower were functionally the same city. That is not an engineering failure. That is an institutional coordination failure, and tenants paid attention. The second failure is built into the glass itself. Remember that elegant twisting double skin facade, the one that beat the typhoon winds? It came with a cost the renderings never showed. The gap between the outer skin and the inner building, and the curved geometry of the floors, produced floor plates with enormous amounts of space that tenants could not actually use. Inspections of the building found that on many levels, only about half the floor area could be used efficiently. But commercial leases do not work on usable space alone. Tenants were effectively being asked to pay premium tower rents on square meters of dead zone, sweeping curved voids between the window line and the workable office. I want you to sit with that number. 50% efficiency on some of the most expensive commercial floor plates in Asia. The architectural feature that won the awards was the same feature quietly strangling the leasing math. If you have ever leased commercial space and gotten burned by the gap between rentable area and usable area, tell that story in the comments. Our audience includes people who have sat on both sides of those negotiations, and I read everyone. The third failure is timing and pricing into the teeth of it. Shanghai Tower opened into a softening market. Commercial occupancy rates across Shanghai were sliding as new supply flooded the district, and corporate tenants were hunting for bargains. The tower's response was to hold out for premium rents justified by its records and its green certification. The market's response was silence. Even the International Monetary Fund weighed in on the broader pattern, pointing to China's construction sector as an example of investment decisions made without commercial discipline. And the IMF's underlying point stands on its own logic. No private developer answering to private shareholders could build a tower this expensive, lease it this slowly, and survive. The only reason Shanghai Tower could absorb $1.5 billion in losses is that the entity behind it was never subject to the market test in the first place. That's the named party in this file. Not a contractor, not the architect. The state-backed development model itself, which built a monument first and asked who would pay rent second. And then there's the crown of the building, the part of this story that became almost a symbol of the whole project. The tower's upper floors were always reserved for an ultra-luxury hotel, the J Hotel, operated by Jinjiang International, itself a major Chinese state-owned hospitality group. It was announced as the highest luxury hotel in the world. And then, for roughly 5 years after the tower opened, it simply didn't open. Year after year, the summit of the second tallest building on the planet sat dark and unfinished, with the pandemic adding a final delay on top of everything that came before. The J Hotel finally welcomed its first guests in June 2021, 5 years late, with rooms running from around $450 a night and a restaurant on the 120th floor billed as the highest in any building on Earth. And there's one more entry in the file. In 2020, before the hotel ever opened, water leaks broke out inside the tower, with reports describing damage spreading down dozens of floors and ruining office equipment along the way. The operator said the issue was repaired and inspections were conducted. But for a building already fighting a reputation problem, images of water pouring through a $2.4 billion landmark circulating on Chinese social media did exactly the damage you'd expect. So let's close the file and state the finding plainly. Shanghai Tower did not fail as a structure. It stands, it twists, it survives typhoons. As engineering, it may be one of the great achievements of this century. It failed as a business, and it failed in ways that were visible on paper before the first piling was driven. Floor plates that wasted half their area, a certification process the builder's own government couldn't expedite, premium pricing into a falling market, a flagship hotel 5 years late. And behind all of it, a funding model where the people writing the checks were never the people who had to answer for the returns. The tower was built to be a monument to economic strength. What the record shows instead is a monument to what happens when prestige drives the pro forma, when a building exists to make a statement first and money second. Here's my question for you, and I genuinely want the comment section's verdict on this one. Is Shanghai Tower a failure, or is a national landmark allowed to lose money the way a museum or a monument does? Was this ever really a commercial building at all? Make your case below. The best arguments from this comment section shape which file we open next. If institutional failures hidden inside iconic buildings is your kind of story, the file on 432 Park Avenue is already open on this channel. A tower with the opposite problem, fully sold and allegedly falling apart. Every collapse has a cost. Every cost has a record. We open the file.